everyone, welcome back to my channel. So this video is going to be about all the books that I've read recently. So I didn't do an August wrap up because I had a lot going on in August. I was traveling and then I just didn't have time to film a wrap up, and then in September I didn't really read that much, so I thought it would make sense to just combine my August and September wrap up into one video because I do want to talk about all of the books that I have read. So I have them all written on a sticky note because I don't remember what most of these books were and I don't own many of them, so I had to write them all down on a sticky note. So the first three books that I read in August were part of my A Clockwork Reader taste test video, which I will link in one of these corners. I think it's just in one of these corners. I'm gonna link that video, but one of the books that I read was A Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I really enjoyed this story. I loved the characters. Like, there's one thing that really stood out to me from this story was the characters and the relationship with each other. Like Nathaniel, Silas, and Elizabeth. I really enjoyed their characters and their dynamic and their relationship with each other. I just really loved it, but the story didn't really like stand out to me or anything. Like, I didn't really care about the plot. I wasn't really invested in it, so that's why I just gave it 3 stars, because it was an interesting plot from what I can like vaguely remember, but it just wasn't anything that stood out to me personally. But I really loved the characters and the writing was beautiful. Like, I was listening to the audiobook and as I was reading I was like frantically like writing down the quotes that I really loved in my phone because there were just so many beautiful quotes. But yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. And then I also read 5 centimeters per second. I think I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was really cute but also really sad, but it didn't really like stand out to me or anything. But the story was really beautiful and I do want to watch the movie because I've heard that the movie is beautiful. So that was 5 centimeters per second. And the last book that I read for that experiment was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I have a very interesting relationship with this book because this was my second time reading it for this video. The first time that I read it was in like high school, I think. I was in like 11th grade, I think. And I did not enjoy it then. I gave it, I think, 3 stars. But then I eventually changed my rating to 2 stars because I just really didn't like the story. I wasn't invested in the characters. I found it to be really slow moving and kind of boring at times. So I just really wasn't vibing with the story back then, and I thought that I would really enjoy it now because my reading taste has changed a lot and I've learned to like enjoy like slower stories and characters and world building more. But I did not like the story still, even now. I think it's just not for me. I just think it's too slow and not much is happening at times. And the writing is beautiful, don't get me wrong. The writing is beautiful and the atmosphere and like the vibes, they're all there. But to me, I just couldn't really connect with the story or the characters. I didn't care about Celia and Marco. Like, I didn't care about the competition. I didn't care about their relationship. I didn't care about really anything, and I was just like pushing to finish this book. I found the audiobook on YouTube and I was just like trying to finish this book because I didn't want to DNF it for that video. But yeah, I gave it 2 stars this time around. It's a objectively like beautiful story, beautiful writing, beautiful world, but it's just not the type of story for me personally, which really makes me upset because I really thought I was gonna love it this time. Like, I had very high expectations. I think that's also where I set myself up for failure because I really thought I was gonna love it this time, but sadly I didn't. The next book I read in August was Finding Me by Viola Davis. This is her newest memoir, and if you don't know who Viola Davis is, I don't know how you don't know who she is, but she's a very prominent actress, has won many awards, hasn't been in many shows and movies. She was in How to Get Away with Murder, which is probably one of my favorite shows. I haven't rewatched it in a hot minute, but that show is really good and she's just an incredible actress. And this memoir was very devastating to listen to. I listened to it on audio, and she narrates it herself, which I highly recommend listening to the audiobook, because Viola Davis, her narration and just the way that she presents the story is just so captivating and so emotional. So if you do want to read this story, I recommend the audiobook. I just found it very hard to listen to at times because it talks about her growing up in an abusive household and all of the struggles that she went through, and it's just really hard to listen to, and it's a lot to take in sometimes. So if you do want to read this story, then I do recommend looking up like the content warnings, because it goes into a lot of heavy stuff. But if you can get through the story, then I highly recommend it, because it's just so interesting seeing how she rose to fame and how her whole journey with acting began. I thought it was just really interesting, and just her narration just was incredible. So I highly recommend that memoir. And the next book I read in August was The Secret Life of Church Ladies, which is a collection of short stories, and I listened to it on audio, which I'm finding is my downfall because I just wasn't really connecting with the story. But there were a few stories here and there that I really liked. I think Peach Cobbler was one of them, and it was just an interesting collection of short stories. They were beautifully written, but nothing that really like stood out to me. I think it's because I was listening to it on audio, which I can't connect with stories on audio sometimes depending on the kind of story that it is. But I thought it was a good collection of short stories, and I gave it 3 stars. If you're interested in it, it's a pretty quick read. I think the audiobook is like 4 or 5 hours long, I think, so it's pretty quick to get through if you just want to read some short stories every day. It is a good collection, but it just wasn't my personal favorite. The next book I read was The Cruel Prince. This book I have tried reading 2 other times before. I tried reading this last year. I just could not connect with it. I think I got like 100-ish pages in before I was like, I can't do this. This is not the story for me. I cannot do it. And then I tried reading it earlier this year when I had COVID. Also could not read it then. But then I just heard so many people talking about it, and so many people say that you just have to push through the first book to get to the next ones, because those are the best ones in the series. And I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna give it one last try. So I got it on audiobook. I think listening to this on audio was the best way for me to finally get through this story, because I was able to listen to it at work, and I was able to like get the gist of what was happening without needing to like sit down and like trudge through like 300 something pages of a book that I'm not really vibing with. So highly recommend the audiobook if you're struggling to get through the story, because the narrator also does a really good job. So I finally trudged through this story, and wow, I'm so happy that I decided to do that, because the ending to this book, I was literally in shock. Like, I was with my boyfriend in the car and I was listening to the audiobook, and I was just like, for like the last like half hour of this audiobook, because wow, was not expecting that. And this story is just so interesting. Like, the political intrigue is very interesting, and Jude and Cardin's relationship, yeah, Jude is a badass character, and Cardin is just so fascinating, and their relationship, like their enemies to lovers, it's definitely there. So I'm very interested to continue with the rest of the story, because the setup in this one, I need to see what happens. I've just heard that the books get even better and better. I'm just so happy that I finally made it through this book so that I can continue with the rest of the series, because I just know that I'm really going to enjoy the rest of this series, and I'm really excited to read the rest of the books. Next up, I read Yona of the Dawn Volume 10. Oh, I love this series so much. Like, just the found family and all of the characters, they just mean so much to me. Honestly, I don't remember what happens in this volume because it's been a hot minute since I read it, but I just love these characters, and I just remember being back in this world and just loving every second of it. Like, I love this story so much, and I have volume 11 on my shelf so I can finally read it physically, because I've just been reading it on my phone this entire time, and I'm just so happy that I can finally read at least one volume physically, because the rest of the ones that I have are like volume 23 and onward. But yeah, I just love this story so much. I just love the 4 dragons and Hawk and Yun and Yona. I literally love all these characters so much. They mean literally so much to me. And the fact that the show doesn't have a second season, I don't want to talk about it, but yeah, I gave this volume 5 stars. I think I've given every single volume except for the first one 5 stars. So I just love this series so much. I highly recommend the anime and reading the manga, and it's just, I just love Yona the Dawn so much. So that was definitely the highlight of August. And then after that, I finally finished reading The Secret History. I started this book in June and I finished it at like the end of August, I think. So this book was a mission to get through. I have a lot of tabs. I have an annotated flip through up on my channel if you want to see all of my annotations, but I really enjoyed this story a lot. It was just so interesting, and the characters are all terrible people, but in the most interesting way. And it's just such an interesting story, and I just loved dissecting every single page, and I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I buddy read it with one of my friends, and it was just the moment and the ending. I spoiled it for myself before I actually got to it, but the ending, yeah. So if you want like a dark academia with like, I don't even say they're morally gray. They're just straight up terrible characters, and just some interesting commentary and very interesting dynamics between all of these characters. Like if you want something like that, then I recommend The Secret History, especially this time of year because of the dark academia and fall vibes that it has. So yeah, finally read The Secret History. Finally got off my currently reading. It was a moment of celebration. I was like, oh thank God. My currently reading finally has 0 books on it, and I was rejoicing. So yeah, this took a while to get through, but when I finally did finish it, it was just very satisfying. So that's The Secret History. And then the last book that I read in August, I'm looking at my notes, the last book was A Deal with the Devil by Elizabeth O'Rourke. I read this on my Kindle. It's on Kindle Unlimited, and I read it super fast. I think I read it in like 2 days. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. There were some parts that I was like, iffy about. I just remember really enjoying their relationship and the way that their romance developed, because it's like an assistant and like boss type of dynamic, which I'm normally like not into that because of like the power imbalances, but in this one it worked for me. But I thought it was really good. The steamy scenes were very much there. Steamy scenes were very good. The writing was really good. It was really engaging, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars, and I do want to continue with the rest of the series because I think the next book follows, is it Drew? One of the characters, I forgot where her name was, but she has like a terrible boyfriend, and the second book is about her finding her love story, and I'm really interested in that one. But yeah, those are all of the books that I read in August. And then the first book that I read in September was a book that literally everybody is talking about. Probably everybody has read at this point, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is her memoir, and if you're not familiar with who Jeanette McCurdy is, she was a prominent actress on Nickelodeon. She played Sam Puckett on iCarly and also was in Sam and Cat. And basically this story talks about her very difficult relationship with her mother, who is very narcissistic and abusive and controlling, and her relationship with acting also, because her mom basically forced her into acting at 6 years old because it was her mom's dream. Her mom always wanted to be an actress, but she wasn't able to, so she kind of pushed that dream onto Jeanette, and she started acting when she was 6 years old, and she never wanted to be an actress. And she just talks about her relationship with acting and how she feels about acting, how she always felt about it, and how it was never her dream. She never wanted to be an actress. She really loves writing. She wanted to be a writer, and it's a very difficult story to get through. If you are interested in reading this book, then I highly recommend looking up the trigger warnings, because she talks in depth about her eating disorders and her substance abuse and her difficult relationship with her abusive mother. So if you can get through the story, then I highly recommend it, because it's so devastating listening to her talk about how she had so much pressure on her at this young age, because she was basically the breadwinner of the family, and how that just put so much pressure on her. And she was like a teenager, and she never wanted to be an actress. She didn't want to be these characters. She didn't want to like put herself into the role of like these characters that are like experiencing like terrible things. Like she talks about one time having to like audition and be like a homeless child, how that just affects your brain and like your development, because you're putting yourself into the shoes of these characters that are experiencing like terrible things, and you're still a young child yourself, and you're still figuring yourself out and developing, and just not being able to fully have the childhood that you want, because you have to pretend to be all of these characters, and you have to provide for your family and be there for your mom and your dad and everyone there. And it's a very devastating story, but I'm very happy that she is now healing and found the courage to put all of that into words. This is one of the most important books that I've ever read, and I highly recommend it to everyone if you can read it, because it just goes into so much about child actors and everything that child actors go through, and how they shouldn't have this much pressure on them, and how they shouldn't have to be doing all of these things at such a young age. And I personally don't think child actors should exist. Like, I just always found it to be really weird that I'm watching like a newborn baby on TV, or that I'm watching like a 5-year-old on TV. Like, it just has always felt really weird to me, and this really just goes into everything that goes into being a child actor. And she also talks about her time on Nickelodeon, obviously, and everything that went on behind the scenes with the creator, who is allegedly Dan Schneider, and just everything that he did on set, how he treated all the actors, how he treated her specifically, how he was really like gross, and just so many things that went on in Nickelodeon, and how they offered her hush money to not talk about her experience on Nickelodeon, and she didn't accept that money. And it's just, there's a lot with Dan Schneider and Nickelodeon and everything. There's tons of videos on it on the internet if you're interested in the weird world that is Dan Schneider. I don't want to get into it, but yeah, this is just a very important story, and I highly recommend the audiobook because she narrates it herself, and there's so many parts where she just gets so emotional and you can hear it in her voice, and it's very devastating to listen to. But if you can get through the story, then I highly recommend it. I'm gonna share some quotes from I'm Glad My Mom Died, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I guess. I don't know how you can spoil a memoir, but if you don't want to hear any of the quotes or anything, then just skip to the next timestamp. But I just want to share the few little tabs that I have because they're just so well written. So the first one says, I know I've grown bitter, I know I've grown resentful, but I don't fucking care. I feel like that show robbed me of my youth, of a normal adolescence where I could experience life without every little thing I did being critiqued, discussed, or ridiculed. I started to thoroughly dislike fame by the time I turned 16. But now at 21, I despise it. What is my identity even? What the fuck is that? How would I know? I've pretended to be other people my whole life, my whole childhood and adolescence and young adulthood. The years that you're supposed to spend finding yourself, I was spending pretending to be other people. The years that you're supposed to spend building character, I was spending building characters. So much of my life has felt so out of control for so long, and I'm done with that being my reality. I want my life to be in my hands, not an eating disorders or a casting director's or an agent's or my mom's. Mine. Maybe I feel this way now because I viewed my mom that way for so long. I had her up on a pedestal. I know how detrimental that pedestal was to my well-being and life. That pedestal kept me stuck, emotionally stunted, living in fear, dependent, in a near constant state of emotional pain and without the tools to even identify that pain, let alone deal with it. I could honestly probably make a whole video about this book, but I don't think I can articulate my thoughts well enough, but just a really, really good story. Highly recommend it. After that, I read Spy Family volumes 4 and 5. I just love these characters so much. And this series is just so good. Like, if you want an amazing manga to get into, I highly recommend this series. It's still ongoing. There's only 8 volumes out now, but it's just so good. And the anime is also really good. And I just love these characters. Bond is so cute. Him and Anya have such a cute little relationship. And Yuri is, he's there. Yeah, he's just there. I don't know what else to say about Yuri besides him just being there and being very weird. I love this series so much. I think I gave this one 5 stars and I gave this one 4 stars just because I don't like Yuri. But yeah, that is Spy Family. And then next I read Galatea, which is a short story by Madeline Miller. I thought it was fine. It follows the myth of obviously Galatea, and it was beautifully written as anything by Madeline Miller is. And yeah, I thought it was fine. Like, wasn't really like groundbreaking or anything. There were some lines that were beautiful because she just has the most beautiful writing, and it was just like a feminist, good for her type of moment. And I enjoyed it, so I think I gave it either 3 or 4 stars. If you want a quick short story to read, then I recommend this one. It's like 30 pages, I think. I read it in like half an hour. Last up, to wrap up my reading in September, I read volumes 6 and 7 of Spy Family. I just wasn't really in like the physical, like novel reading mood, so I was just reading a bunch of manga and one of my favorite manga series, and it was just such a good time. Volume 6, we're introduced to Fiona, and it kind of starts up a love triangle type of situation. Wasn't really a huge fan of it. Why did we need a love triangle? It's just very embarrassing for Fiona. Like, girl, there's this one scene towards the end where she like embarrasses herself in front of Lloyd and Yor, and it's like, girl, get up. You're better than this. You're a badass spy. I know you're better than this. But it's okay. I would be crushing on Lloyd too, because of course. Like, why wouldn't I? But like, I get where she's coming from, but like, you're better than this. I know you're better than this. So it was a little embarrassing for me to witness her doing all that over a man, but it was a thing. I think I gave it 4 stars because I just don't. Why do we need a love triangle? It's very annoying, but whatever. And then volume 7 follows Damien, who is like Anya's school friend, I guess. And I thought it was, I love Damien. I actually really like Damien and his dynamic with Anya and his feelings towards her. He has very complicated feelings towards her, and it's really cute, and it was really interesting learning more about Damien and his story and his relationship with his father, and it was just really interesting. And yeah, I think I gave this one 5 stars, and those are all the books that I read in August and September. Overall, I would say that I had a pretty good reading month in August and September. I didn't read that much in September, but I did read a lot of really good books. I think I gave everything in September either 4 or 5 stars, which is pretty good. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite book of September was. I think mine definitely was I'm Glad My Mom Died. Like, I can talk about this book for ages. I could probably make a whole video about it because I just have so many thoughts about it, and I kind of want to reread it so I can like tab the moments that I really want to talk about. But yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna make a whole video on this yet. I might not, we'll see. But this was definitely my favorite book of September, and let me know what your least favorite book of September was. I didn't have any least favorites because I enjoyed everything that I read, but just let me know down below your favorite and least favorite book of September. And yes, so that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.